The Scorched, Arizona Territory, 1879. Heat waves danced across the barren landscape as Elizabeth Hargrove collapsed beside the withered yucca, her legs swollen purple from the rattler's strike. Miles from any settlement, her canteen empty, death seemed certain. Then a shadow fell across her face, tall, silent, watching. The Apache scout knelt beside her, dark eyes assessing her fading life. His people and hers were enemies, yet his hands moved with surprising gentleness, applying crushed herbs to the wound. He lifted her broken body as if it weighed nothing, carrying her away from the trail that had nearly become her grave. Could a woman raised to fear the savage tribes trust her life to a man who had every reason to hate her kind? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elizabeth Hargrove had never imagined dying alone in the desert. Just 6 months earlier, she had been arranging flowers in her father's Boston parlor, debating silk versus satin for her coming-out gown. The silver hand mirror on her vanity had reflected a life of privilege. Afternoon teas, pianoforte lessons, and carefully chaperoned walks with suitable young men from proper families. That life ended the evening father announced her betrothal to Congressman Wallace Thornton, a widower 30 years her senior with cold eyes and wandering hands. When she refused, father had given her an ultimatum: marry Thornton or be disowned. That night, she'd written to her brother James in Arizona Territory, begging sanctuary. A fresh start, James had written back. The territory needs educated women. You can teach, perhaps open a small shop. No one will care about Boston society here. The journey west had tested her in ways Boston never could. She'd abandoned her trunks of finery in St. Louis, trading silk for sturdy cotton, kid gloves for calloused hands. Each mile from Boston had peeled away another layer of Elizabeth Hargrove, society daughter, revealing someone stronger underneath. James had met her in Santa Fe, nearly unrecognizable with his sun-weathered face and frontier clothes. "Lizzie," he'd laughed, swinging her around, "you're going to hate it and love it all at once." For 3 months, she'd lived in his small cabin outside Tucson, learning to cook over an open fire, to recognize which plants held water, which clouds promised rain. James had been endlessly patient, never mocking her mistakes. "You're adapting better than most Eastern flowers," he'd told her. "Got some steel in your stem." Then came the fever, swift and merciless. 3 days from first cough to final breath. Elizabeth had buried her brother beneath the mesquite tree he'd loved, using his own shovel to break the hard earth. Her cousin Martha lived in Tucson proper. The journey should have taken 2 days at most, but the wagon axle had cracked on the first day, the wheel collapsing in a puff of dust. She'd gathered what she could carry and continued on foot, certain the trail couldn't be far. By noon of the second day, her water was gone. By evening, the landmarks James had described were nowhere in sight. Lost, she'd made camp beneath a rocky outcropping, promising herself to find the trail at first light. The rattlesnake had struck as she rolled her blanket at dawn, its fangs sinking deep into her calf. She'd remembered James's instructions: stay calm, don't run. But panic had sent her stumbling away, each heartbeat pushing venom deeper into her blood. Now, as consciousness faded beneath the merciless sun, Elizabeth touched the small locket at her throat, the only piece of Boston she'd kept. Inside were miniature portraits of James and Mother, both gone now. Her fingers couldn't manage the tiny clasp. She would die with the locket closed, the faces of her loved ones hidden away. Strange, she thought, how death focused the mind. What mattered now was not the society parties she'd attended or the suitors she'd entertained, but simpler things: the sound of James's laughter, the smell of Mother's lavender water, the taste of cool water on a hot day. Water. Her cracked lips formed the word without sound. In her fevered mind, she saw the creek behind her childhood home, heard its gentle gurgling. Elizabeth reached toward the mirage with trembling fingers. Instead of water, her hand met leather, a moccasin. Through swollen eyes, she glimpsed a tall figure silhouetted against the sun. Dark hair hung in 2 long braids adorned with beads and feathers. The face above her remained shadowed, unreadable. Apache. James's warnings echoed in her failing mind. Stay clear of Apache territory. They've suffered too much at white hands to welcome strangers. She should be terrified, but terror required energy she no longer possessed. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. If death came by arrow or knife rather than thirst and venom, perhaps it would be quicker. The figure knelt beside her. A hand, calloused but gentle, touched her forehead. Elizabeth caught the scent of smoke, pine, and something medicinal. Not the smell of an enemy come to take her life, but of someone assessing her condition. With her last conscious thought, Elizabeth wondered if death might wear an unexpected face. Not the pale horse of Revelation, but a silent guardian with eyes as dark and ancient as the desert itself. Dakota had been tracking the raiders for 4 days. The eagle feather talisman at his belt, a gift from his grandmother before her passing, swayed gently as he moved through the landscape like a shadow. His people called him Silent Walker for his ability to cross even dry brush without sound. The Apache way was to move with the land, not against it. He'd found their trail near the burned-out homestead. Boot prints unlike Apache moccasins, horse droppings from grain-fed mounts, a dropped cavalry button that confirmed his suspicions. Not regular army, but deserters who joined with outlaws to prey on isolated settlements. They attacked Apache camps too, then left behind settler items to stoke the fires of hatred between his people and the newcomers. The tribal council had sent him to gather proof, not to engage. "We cannot afford war," the elder had said. "Bring evidence to the fort commander who still listens." Dakota touched the eagle feather, remembering his vow. Though his father had been Mexican, his mother pure Apache, he walked in both worlds with equal discomfort. The settlers distrusted his copper skin. Some Apache questioned his mixed blood. Only his skills as scout and healer had earned him respect. He'd been following fresh tracks when he caught the scent, blood and the distinctive musk of rattlesnake. Changing direction, he moved toward a solitary yucca where buzzards circled hopefully. Predators recognized death before it arrived. The woman lay crumpled like discarded clothing, her skin blistered from sun, and tainted blue-gray around her lips. The snake bite on her calf had swollen purple, angry trails of poison spreading upward. Without treatment, death would claim her before nightfall. Dakota knelt beside her, assessing with practiced eyes. A settler woman, young but not a girl. Quality clothing despite trail dust. No wedding band. His gaze caught on something unexpected, her boots, worn at the heels, repaired with rawhide strips using Apache stitching. Someone had taught her frontier ways, yet she'd still wandered into rattlesnake territory unprepared. He should continue tracking. The raider's trail grew colder with each passing hour. This woman was not his concern. Her people brought disease, took land, killed game, broke treaties. Let nature claim her as it had claimed so many of his people. The woman's eyes fluttered open, clouded with venom and dehydration. No fear registered in those feverish green depths, only calm acceptance. Her hand moved weakly toward the medallion at her throat before falling back. "Water," she whispered, the word barely audible. Dakota reached for his water skin, then stopped. Why waste precious water on a dying settler? Yet something in her quiet dignity stirred ancient teachings. The honored warrior shows mercy to the defeated. The true healer aids all who suffer. His grandmother's voice seemed to ride the desert breeze. All life deserves compassion, Dakota, even those who may become enemies. Decision made. He uncorked his water skin and moistened her cracked lips. She swallowed weakly as he assessed the snake bite. Not too advanced, the rattler had been young, its venom less potent. He removed the small medicine pouch from his belt, extracting dried willow bark, yucca root, and the special clay from the high canyon. Working quickly, he chewed the willow bark into paste, packed the wound with clay to draw out poison, and bound it with strips torn from his spare shirt. The woman moaned but didn't resist his ministrations. To save her would complicate everything. To leave her would simplify his mission but stain his spirit. Dakota had lived between worlds long enough to know that simple paths rarely led to right outcomes. He gathered her into his arms, surprised at her lightness. Death had already begun claiming its due. The hidden spring lay half a day's journey east. Water pure enough to cleanse the wound, caves cool enough to break her fever. The woman's head lolled against his chest as he stood. A decision of moments would now cost him days. The raiders would be harder to find. The tribal council would question his judgment. Yet as the eagle feather brushed against his thigh, Dakota felt unusual certainty. This dying woman with sunrise hair had appeared on his path for a reason. The Great Spirit wove lives together like strands in a basket. He would follow this strand and see where it led. Darkness and light alternated in Elizabeth's fevered mind. Sometimes she was a child again in Boston, mother brushing her hair with long, gentle strokes. Other times, she stood by James's grave, the Arizona sun burning her neck. Most often, she drifted in empty darkness where pain pulsed with each heartbeat. Occasionally, reality penetrated her delirium. Cool water on her lips, strong hands turning her. A deep voice speaking words she couldn't understand. These moments anchored her briefly before fever dragged her back into swirling memories. In one moment of clarity, Elizabeth opened her eyes to find herself in a shallow cave. A small fire cast dancing shadows on rock walls. Her leg throbbed dully, wrapped in some kind of poultice that smelled of earth and herbs. Beside her sat the Apache, grinding something in a clay bowl, his profile sharp against firelight. Fear jolted through her. She tried to move, to escape, but her body betrayed her with weakness. The man turned immediately, alerted by her movement. Dark eyes studied her face. He said something in his language, then switched to heavily accented English. "Be still. Poison still fights in you." Elizabeth's parched throat managed only a whisper. "Why?" He seemed to understand her question. "Found you. Snake bite. Brought you here." "No," she rasped. "Why save me?" The man considered this, his expression unreadable. He dipped a wooden cup into a water skin and held it to her lips. "Drink." The water tasted of minerals and life itself. Elizabeth swallowed greedily until he pulled the cup away. "Slow," he instructed. "Too much makes sick." Her mind cleared slightly with the blessed water. She studied her captor, no, her rescuer. Younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30. His face bore no paint, but intricate beadwork adorned his buckskin shirt. A single eagle feather hung from his braided hair. "Your name?" she managed. "Dakota," he replied, returning to his grinding. The clay bowl contained some kind of root being pulverized into paste. "Takeoda," she repeated carefully, the syllables foreign on her tongue. A slight nod acknowledged her effort. "Your name?" he echoed. "Elizabeth Hargrove." He frowned at the complexity. "Elizabeth." Despite everything, a small smile touched her lips. "Close enough." Dakota added water to his paste, stirring it with practiced motions. "More medicine for leg. Will hurt. Need to draw poison out." Fear returned. "What are you going to do?" Instead of answering, he unwrapped the bandage on her calf. The swelling had decreased, but angry red lines still radiated from 2 puncture marks. He showed her the mixture in his bowl. Clay, plants, good medicine. Elizabeth had no choice but to trust him. If he'd wanted her dead, he could have simply left her by the yucca. She nodded consent. His hands were surprisingly gentle for their strength, applying the poultice with careful precision. The mixture burned like fire against her wound. Elizabeth bit her lip to stifle a cry, tasting blood. "Good," Dakota said, noticing her restraint. "Strong woman." He rewrapped her leg with clean cloth, then offered her more water. This time he added something to it, a bitter herb that made her grimace. "Helps sleep, helps fight poison." Elizabeth drank obediently, then sank back against the blanket beneath her. She noticed for the first time that she lay on his bedroll while he had nothing. "Thank you," she whispered as drowsiness crept over her. "For saving me." Dakota nodded once, his expression solemn. "Rest now. Tomorrow talk more." As sleep claimed her, Elizabeth wondered what strange twist of fate had placed her life in the hands of a man her kind regarded as enemy. James had spoken of Apache differently than most settlers, with respect for their skills, sympathy for their losses. "They fight because we've left them no choice, Lizzie," he'd explained. "Wouldn't you fight for your home?" Through the night, awareness came in fragments. Dakota checking her fever, cool cloths on her forehead, his voice chanting softly. A prayer or healing song, she couldn't tell. By morning, Elizabeth woke with surprising clarity. The fever had broken. Sunlight filtered through the cave entrance, illuminating Dakota as he knelt by a small spring at the rear of the cave, filling water skins. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice stronger. He turned, assessing her improved condition with a nod of satisfaction. "Hidden place, safe place, good water." Elizabeth struggled to sit up. "Why would you help me? Our people. Not all Apache same, not all white same." He offered her a strip of dried meat. "Eat. Need strength." As she chewed the tough, smoky food, Elizabeth realized the enormity of what had happened. This man had saved her when her own world had abandoned her. Whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. By the third day, Elizabeth could stand with Dakota's help. They established a routine: mornings for changing her bandage and strengthening exercises, afternoons for rest while Dakota disappeared to scout the surrounding area. She never asked if he was continuing his original mission. The answer seemed obvious in the careful way he studied the horizon each evening upon return. On the fourth day, he returned earlier than usual, his expression grim. Without speaking, he began gathering their few belongings. "What's wrong?" Elizabeth asked, alarmed by his urgency. Dakota removed something from his pocket, a tarnished brass button with an eagle insignia. "Found this. Fresh tracks nearby." "A cavalry button? The army is looking for me." Hope flared briefly. He shook his head. "Not regular army. Bad men. Deserters, outlaws. They raid both sides, settler, Apache. Blame each side for the other's suffering." Elizabeth's throat tightened. "The men I'm supposed to fear are white, not Apache." "Men to fear come in all colors," Dakota replied, continuing to pack. "These men especially dangerous. Looking for something or someone." A memory surfaced the day before the snakebite. She'd stopped to rest in a shaded arroyo and heard voices. Peering over the edge, she'd seen men in partial cavalry uniforms meeting with others dressed as civilians. Their conversation had seemed suspicious, but in her exhaustion, she'd dismissed it. "I saw them," she whispered, "before the snake. Men meeting in an arroyo. Some wore cavalry uniforms, others ordinary clothes. They were arguing about payment." Dakota stopped packing, his attention fully on her. "You saw their faces?" Elizabeth nodded. "Clearly, they were less than 50 yards away. They know someone saw them." He held up the button. "Found this near your trail. They tracked you, found where snake bit you. Now they search this area." Cold fear replaced the relative safety she'd felt. Why would they care if someone saw them meeting? Because what they plan is not just raiding. Something bigger. Dakota resumed packing with increased urgency. "Must leave. Now, can you walk?" Elizabeth tested her injured leg. The swelling had subsided, but pain shot through her calf when she put weight on it. "Not quickly. Not far." Dakota considered this obstacle, then disappeared outside. He returned minutes later leading a pinto horse Elizabeth hadn't seen before. "Where did you?" "Apache horses hidden nearby. Emergency only." He lashed their belongings to the horse's back. "We ride together until safe." Elizabeth hesitated. Leaving meant placing her trust entirely in this man's hands, following him deeper into territory where no one would find her if things went wrong. Staying meant facing men who would kill a witness without hesitation. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Canyon to the north. Ancient place. Safe place." He offered his hand. Must decide now. The rational choice was clear. Elizabeth took his hand, allowing him to help her onto the horse. He mounted behind her, one arm securing her waist while the other held the simple leather reins. "Hold mane," he instructed. I hold you. They rode in silence as twilight descended. Dakota guided the horse along rocky ground where tracks would be difficult to follow, occasionally stopping to listen or study the landscape. Elizabeth marveled at how different the desert appeared through his eyes. Not empty wasteland, but a living text full of information. After an hour of slow travel, he suddenly reined the horse to a stop, his body tensing. What is it? She whispered. Smoke. He pointed to a thin column barely visible against the darkening sky. Not Apache. Not army. Without explanation, he turned the horse toward the smoke. Elizabeth wanted to protest. Surely they should ride away from potential danger, but something in his determined expression stopped her. They approached cautiously, dismounting when the horse grew nervous. Dakota helped Elizabeth to a boulder where she could rest, then disappeared into the gathering darkness with a whispered instruction to remain still. 20 agonizing minutes passed before he returned, his face a mask of controlled anger. Settler wagon, he said quietly. Family, all dead. Elizabeth's hand flew to her mouth. The raiders. He nodded once. Same men tracking you. They leave Apache arrowheads behind. Want settlers to blame Apache. We should report this to the authorities, Elizabeth insisted. Dakota's laugh held no humor. Who would believe? Apache scout, white woman barely alive. They would hang me, maybe you too as Apache lover. The harsh truth of his assessment silenced her protest. In this territory, justice wasn't colorblind. The canyon? She asked finally. Yes, safer there. Can heal completely. Plan what to do. He helped her back onto the horse. These raiders must be stopped. Too many innocent dead. As they rode away from the massacre site, Elizabeth realized how completely their fates had intertwined. She was no longer just a snakebite victim he'd saved, but a witness to something that threatened both their peoples. Whatever path lay ahead, they would walk it together. Dawn found them sheltered beneath a sandstone overhang. The horse hobbled nearby. They'd traveled through most of the night, stopping only when Elizabeth could no longer stay upright. Though her leg was healing, the long ride had awakened fresh pain. 2 days to canyon, Dakota announced, studying the distant mountains. Need food, more water. Elizabeth watched him prepare for hunting, checking his knife, bow, and the 3 arrows in his quiver. Despite her exhaustion, curiosity pushed aside discomfort. Can I help somehow? She asked. I hate being useless. Dakota considered her for a moment, then nodded toward a gnarled tree growing improbably from the rocky soil. That tree holds water. Good medicine, too. Can you collect? Elizabeth took the small knife he offered, its bone handle smooth from years of use. How do I know which parts to take? Instead of explaining, Dakota helped her stand, supporting her weight as they moved to the tree. With practiced hands, he showed her how to identify the water-bearing sections of bark, demonstrating the proper cutting technique. Like this, he said, slicing a small section that immediately beaded with moisture. Not too deep. Tree must live. Under his watchful eye, Elizabeth attempted the technique. Her first cuts were clumsy, but she improved with each try. The satisfaction of producing even a few drops of precious water outweighed her frustration. Good, Dakota nodded, handing her a small pouch. Collect while I hunt. Left alone, Elizabeth worked methodically, gathering bark and the moisture it contained. The simple task grounded her in a way Boston society never had. Each drop represented survival, immediate, essential, real. After an hour, Dakota returned with 2 desert hares. Elizabeth watched with fascination as he prepared them with swift efficiency, wasting nothing. He showed her how to stretch and prepare the skins for later use, explaining each step in his limited English. Small skins good for pouches, medicine bags, he demonstrated. Larger animals, like deer, make clothing, moccasins. My brother tried teaching me some of this, Elizabeth admitted, attempting to mimic his technique. I wasn't a very good student then. Thought I'd always have a general store nearby. A ghost of a smile touched Dakota's lips. Desert teaches quickly. Learn or die. While the meat smoked over a small, nearly smokeless fire, Dakota carved a walking staff from a length of ironwood. He worked the wood with reverent precision, smoothing it to perfectly fit Elizabeth's height. "For walking," he explained, presenting it to her. "Help balance. Good weapon too, if needed." Elizabeth accepted the gift, running her fingers over the polished surface. "Thank you. It's beautiful craftsmanship." He shrugged off the compliment. Useful things should also please the eye. Apache way. After eating, they continued their journey, moving more slowly now that darkness no longer concealed them. Dakota remained vigilant, frequently stopping to listen or examine tracks only he could see. During these pauses, he began teaching Elizabeth to read the landscape. "See here." He pointed to slight impressions in the sandy soil. "Coyote passed. Small one. Hungry." Elizabeth squinted at what appeared to be random disturbances. "How can you possibly know it was hungry?" Step pattern changes. More direct. No time for marking territory. He traced the tracks with his finger. When you understand tracks, the land speaks to you. Later, when they stopped to rest in the shadow of a mesa, Elizabeth reached into her pocket and removed a small journal and pencil, the only personal items she'd managed to keep from her abandoned belongings. "Can I show you something too?" she asked hesitantly. Dakota nodded, curiosity evident in his eyes. She opened the journal to a blank page and wrote his name in careful letters. "This is how we record things that must be remembered. These marks mean Dakota." He studied the writing with intense concentration, then pointed to another blank space. "Show Elizabeth." She wrote her name beneath his, then guided his hand to hold the pencil. With careful concentration, Dakota traced the letters of his name, his expression one of deep focus. "Your marks stay when voice is gone," he observed. "Powerful medicine." "Yes," Elizabeth agreed. "Words can last longer than the person who wrote them." For the remainder of the day, as they traveled toward the distant canyon, they exchanged knowledge, Dakota pointing out edible plants and water sources, Elizabeth teaching him to write simple words in her journal. By evening, when they made camp in a dry wash, Elizabeth realized something had fundamentally shifted. They were no longer simply rescuer and rescued, but two people building a bridge between different worlds. With each shared skill, the distance between those worlds narrowed. "Tomorrow we reach Canyon Entrance," Dakota said as they finished the last of the smoked rabbit. "Sacred place to my people. Few outsiders have seen it." "Why show me?" Elizabeth asked. Dakota was silent for a long moment before answering. "Some paths chosen for us. Great Spirit put you in my path for reason. I listen." As night enveloped them, Elizabeth tested her weight on the walking staff. Her leg was growing stronger. Soon she would no longer need Dakota's support to walk. Yet somehow, the thought brought more uncertainty than relief. Night in the desert brought a bone-deep chill that contradicted the day's heat. Huddled near their small fire, Elizabeth wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Above them, stars crowded the sky in numbers she'd never imagined possible in Boston's gaslit evenings. "So many," she whispered, gazing upward, "like diamonds scattered across black velvet." Dakota followed her gaze. "Stars are ancestors watching over us. Their fires never go out." The poetic image surprised her. "That's beautiful. Is that what all Apache believe?" "Some. Others have different stories." He pointed to a bright cluster. "Those 7 stars, Apache call them 7 sisters. What do your people call them?" "The Pleiades," Elizabeth answered, delighted by this unexpected common ground. "We also call them the 7 sisters. Greek myths say they were daughters of Atlas, transformed into stars." Dakota considered this. Different words, same stars. He began pointing out other constellations, sharing Apache names and stories while Elizabeth offered the Western equivalents. On a scrap of paper, they created an improvised star chart, drawing the major constellations with both sets of names. Their hands occasionally brushed as they worked together, neither pulling away as quickly as they might have days earlier. "In Boston, I attended a ladies' academy," Elizabeth said as they marked the position of the North Star. We studied astronomy as a proper feminine science, though our instructor believed women's minds couldn't grasp celestial mathematics. Dakota frowned. Foolish man. Women in my tribe often best navigators by stars. They travel at night gathering plants while men sleep. Elizabeth laughed. I wish Miss Harrington could hear you say that. She was always apologizing for teaching us beyond our natural comprehension. Many wrong ideas about what women know, what they can learn. Dakota handed her the star chart they'd created. You keep this. Add more as you learn. Elizabeth carefully folded the paper. Tell me about your family. Do you have sisters? Brothers? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, staring into the fire, he began speaking in a measured tone. My mother was daughter of medicine woman. Very respected. She met my father when he came to trade with tribe. Mexican man but honest trader. They married Apache way. His expression softened with memory. 3 summers they were happy. Then bluecoats came. Said treaty moved Apache to reservation. Mother refused to go. Father tried to stop soldiers. His voice grew quieter. Both killed same day. I was 5 winters old. Dakota, I'm so sorry, Elizabeth whispered, the inadequacy of the words painful in her throat. Grandmother raised me, taught medicine ways, tracking old stories, said I must learn to walk in both worlds. His fingers touched the eagle feather in his hair. She gave me this before joining ancestors 4 winters ago. And now you're alone, Elizabeth said, understanding his solitude in a way she couldn't have before James's death. All Apache walk alone now, scattered, hunted, pushed to poorest lands. He added a small branch to the fire. Your turn. Tell of your people. Elizabeth described her childhood in Boston. The rigid expectations, the carefully orchestrated social season, the suffocating propriety. Women in your tribe have no freedom, Dakota observed. Not the kind that matters, she agreed. We're expected to be decorative, accomplished in useless ways, and utterly dependent on fathers or husbands. Why you come west? Dangerous journey for woman alone. Elizabeth explained about Congressman Thornton, her father's ultimatum, and James's offer of sanctuary. Then James died, and I had nowhere else to go. Dakota was silent for a long moment. Both strangers in our own lands now. Yes, Elizabeth said softly, the simple observation striking a chord of recognition. Both caught between worlds. They sat in companionable silence until Dakota spoke again. Your hair, color of sunset. In Apache stories, sunset hair, powerful medicine. Brings change. Self-consciously, Elizabeth touched her copper hair, loosened from its usual bun during their travels. In Boston, red hair is considered unfortunate. Mother always said it was my cross to bear. Your mother wrong, Dakota said simply. Beautiful color, like autumn leaves before winter comes. The unexpected compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. No suitor's elaborate praise had ever affected her like these few straightforward words. Dakota seemed equally surprised by his statement, quickly standing to check on the horse. When he returned, he changed the subject, pointing to the eastern horizon. Tomorrow we reach canyon before sun that high, he indicated. Need early start. Should sleep now. As they settled into their separate bedrolls, Elizabeth found herself wondering about the life she'd left behind. In Boston, she would have been scandalized to camp alone with a man, especially one from a different culture. Yet here, beneath the vast desert sky, old prohibitions seemed as distant as the stars themselves. Dakota, she said quietly, not sure if he was still awake. Thank you, not just for saving my life, but for showing me this world I never knew existed. His reply came softly through the darkness. Sometimes must lose one world to find another. The profound truth in his words followed Elizabeth into dreams filled with star maps and sunset-colored skies. They reached the canyon entrance as the morning sun crested the eastern mesas. Elizabeth, riding behind Dakota, gasped as the narrow passage suddenly opened into a hidden valley. Towering red sandstone walls rose hundreds of feet on either side, streaked with black and orange mineral deposits. A small stream threaded through cottonwoods and willows, creating an oasis of green amid the desert's austerity. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "like something from a dream." Dakota dismounted, helping Elizabeth down with practiced ease. "Canyon of Ancestors," he explained, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "Sacred place. Protected." He led her along a nearly invisible path that wound between massive boulders and ancient trees. Elizabeth leaned on her walking staff, moving more confidently now that her leg had strengthened. Rounding a bend in the canyon wall, they came upon the cave, a deep recess in the sandstone with a wide, defensible entrance and a natural chimney that would draw smoke upward. "Home," Dakota said simply. "For now." Inside, Elizabeth discovered smooth stone floors worn by centuries of use. At the back, a small spring bubbled from the rock face, providing fresh water. Along one wall, ancient paintings depicted hunters, spirit beings, and star patterns in rich earth tones. "How old are these?" she asked, tracing her fingers just above an ochre-colored image of a running deer. "Oldest from before Apache time," Dakota explained. "My grandmother's grandmother added these." He pointed to a series of handprints pressed against the stone. "Each generation leaves mark. Reminds us we part of longer story." While Dakota secured their horse in a hidden meadow nearby, Elizabeth explored the cave's interior. Previous occupants had left a stone hearth, simple cooking implements, and sleeping platforms raised off the ground. Everything spoke of temporary use, a refuge rather than permanent dwelling. When Dakota returned, they established their small domain efficiently. He showed Elizabeth how to arrange stones to reflect heat from the fire, where to store food safe from animals, and how to use the cave's natural acoustics as warning against intruders. "No one knows you're here?" Elizabeth asked as they finished organizing their meager belongings. "Few Apache know this place now, passed through Mother's family." He paused, arranging kindling for the evening fire. "Many sacred places forgotten as people forced to reservations. Will others come looking for you? Your tribe must wonder where you've gone." Dakota shook his head. "Told council mission might take many moons. Will not worry yet." He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "They not expect me bring white woman." The implications hung between them. His decision to help her had isolated him from his people. Elizabeth looked away, uncomfortable with the debt she could never fully repay. By late afternoon, they had established routines that felt surprisingly natural. Elizabeth tended the fire and prepared simple meals while Dakota hunted and maintained constant vigilance. When he returned with a string of fish from the stream, she showed him how to prepare them the way James had taught her, with wild herbs tucked inside before roasting. "Good," he acknowledged after tasting her cooking. "You learn quickly." "Necessity is an excellent teacher," she replied with a small smile. "In Boston, I could barely boil water without a maid's help." After eating, Dakota led her farther into the canyon, to a wall covered entirely with ancient paintings. Unlike the simpler images in their cave, these told a complex narrative. Figures journeying through trials, confronting massive beasts, reaching toward star beings that extended welcoming hands. "Creation story," Dakota explained. "How first people came to Earth." Elizabeth studied the paintings with growing fascination. They believed their ancestors came from the stars? Not believed. Knew. He traced a spiral pattern. At the center of the composition. Cycle of all life, going out, returning home. As twilight deepened the canyon shadows, they returned to their cave. Elizabeth found herself moving more confidently through the terrain, her body adapting to the desert's rhythms. Her legs still ached by day's end, but the angry red lines of infection had faded completely. Before sleeping, Dakota checked her wound one final time, applying a fresh poultice of herbs. His touch remained clinical, but Elizabeth found herself acutely aware of his proximity. The strength in his hands, the clean scent of pine and smoke that seemed part of him. "Almost healed," he pronounced. "Soon no need for medicine." "Then what?" Elizabeth asked, the question encompassing far more than her recovery. Dakota met her gaze directly. First get stronger, then decide path together. Together. The word settled between them with unexpected weight. As Elizabeth settled onto her sleeping platform, watching firelight dance across the ancient paintings, she realized how completely her understanding of safety had transformed. Security no longer meant proper society or locked doors, but this man's presence and the knowledge they were building between them. In the rhythm of his steady breathing across the fire, she found more peace than in all the drawing rooms of Boston. A week passed in the canyon's sheltering embrace. Elizabeth's strength returned steadily, first walking the length of the canyon, then climbing gentle slopes, finally helping Dakota gather wild foods from the higher reaches. Each day brought new knowledge: which plants healed, which harmed, how to move silently across loose stone, how to listen to the canyon's subtle warnings when strangers approached. They fell into an easy rhythm, dividing tasks without discussion. Evenings were spent beside the fire, sharing stories and expanding their common vocabulary. Elizabeth's journal filled with Apache words and desert wisdom, while Dakota's English grew more fluid with each passing day. On the 8th morning, Elizabeth woke to find Dakota's sleeping place empty. This wasn't unusual. He often rose before dawn to hunt or scout. But something felt different. His bow and quiver were gone, along with his small pack of traveling essentials. By midday, concern had blossomed into worry. By sunset, worry had deepened to fear. Elizabeth maintained the fire, prepared food that went uneaten, and tried to quiet her racing thoughts. Dakota had survived in this wilderness his entire life. Surely nothing could happen to him that he couldn't handle. 3 days passed with no sign of him. On the 4th morning, Elizabeth was gathering firewood when a whisper of movement caught her attention. She spun around, clutching her walking staff defensively, then dropped it immediately as Dakota emerged from the shadows. His face was drawn with exhaustion, a fresh cut marking his cheekbone. "You're hurt?" she exclaimed, rushing forward. He waved away her concern, dropping his pack and lowering himself to a boulder. "Small thing. Need water." Elizabeth fetched water while Dakota removed his moccasins, revealing blistered feet that spoke of many miles traveled without rest. She knelt to help him bathe the raw skin, working in silence until his breathing steadied. "What happened?" she finally asked. "Where did you go?" "Followed raider tracks. Needed to know plans." He accepted the dried meat she offered, chewing slowly. "Found their camp near North Pass. 6 men. Well armed." "And?" Elizabeth prompted when he fell silent. Dakota's expression darkened. "They captured Trader. Questioned him about red-haired woman traveling alone." Elizabeth felt the blood drain from her face. "They're looking specifically for me? How would they even know what I look like?" "Trader had seen you in settlement before you left with brother." Dakota looked away. "They killed him after he told them." Horror washed through her. "Someone died because of me?" "No, because of them." His voice hardened. "Men who kill for pleasure, not survival." Elizabeth paced the small clearing, her mind racing. "But why? What could they possibly want with me?" Dakota removed something from his pocket, a broken pair of wire-rimmed spectacles. "Found these in their camp. Not military issue." She took the glasses, turning them over in her hands. Memory surfaced, the men she'd glimpsed in the arroyo. One had worn spectacles like these, a thin man in civilian clothes speaking with authority to the others. "I remember him," she whispered. "He was giving orders to the men in uniform. Called himself a representative of territorial interests." Dakota nodded grimly. "More than just raiders. Organized. Connected to government." "We need to tell someone," Elizabeth insisted. "The proper authorities." "Who?" Dakota interrupted. "Fort commander? Sheriff? How know they not involved?" The question silenced her protest. In this territory, authority and corruption often walked hand in hand. "What did you hear them planning?" she asked instead. Dakota's expression grew more troubled. "Big raid coming. Both sides hit Apache camp, then settler town same day." Make each blame other. That's monstrous, Elizabeth whispered. It would start a war. War good for men who want land cleared. Apache gone. Settlers scared away. He met her eyes directly. Need reason to bring more soldiers. Take more territory. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. The mysterious meeting she'd witnessed wasn't random. It was part of a calculated plan to incite violence that would justify military intervention and land seizures. They can't possibly get away with this, she said. Already getting away. Who stops them? Dakota gestured toward the canyon walls. Safe here for now, but cannot hide forever. Elizabeth sank down beside him, the weight of knowledge heavy on her shoulders. What do we do? For a long moment, Dakota was silent, fatigue evident in every line of his body. When he finally spoke, his voice carried quiet determination. First I rest, then we make plan. He glanced at her. Need your help, your knowledge of white ways. Together, maybe find solution. Together, Elizabeth echoed, the word both promise and question. That night, as Dakota slept the deep sleep of exhaustion, Elizabeth stood at the cave entrance, watching stars emerge above the canyon walls. The world beyond their sanctuary had suddenly become more threatening. Yet paradoxically, her path seemed clearer. She was no longer simply a woman who needed rescue. She was a witness with knowledge that could prevent bloodshed. For the first time since James's death, Elizabeth felt a sense of purpose stronger than mere survival. Tomorrow they would plan their next steps. Together, as Dakota had said. The thought brought unexpected comfort amid growing danger. Inside the cave, Dakota murmured something in his sleep, his hand reaching out across the space where she usually lay. Without thinking, Elizabeth moved to his side, gently covering his outstretched hand with her own. Rest, she whispered. I'm keeping watch tonight. Morning found them seated at the canyon's edge, a shared water canteen between them as they watched sunrise paint the sandstone walls gold. Dakota had recovered much of his strength after a full night's sleep, though the cut on his cheek had darkened to a bruise. We need evidence, Elizabeth said, breaking their contemplative silence. Something concrete that proves the connection between these raiders and whoever's giving them orders. Dakota nodded. Evidence good, but who believe? Apache word worth nothing to white courts. My word might carry some weight, she countered. I'm still a Hargrove even out here. My father knows judges, senators. Your father who disowned you? Dakota's question held no judgment, only practicality. Elizabeth flinched. Point taken. But there must be someone, the territorial governor perhaps, or a newspaper editor willing to investigate. Maybe. Dakota took a thoughtful sip from the canteen. First need proof. Names. Plans. Without proof, just stories. They lapsed into silence, the magnitude of their task settling between them. Elizabeth absently traced patterns in the sandy soil with her walking staff, her mind racing through possibilities. I could go to Tucson, she suggested finally. Present myself to the authorities. Tell them what I saw. Dakota's response was immediate and firm. Too dangerous. Raiders have connections. You disappear before story told. Then what do you suggest? Frustration edged her voice. We can't just stay hidden while they murder innocent people. Not suggesting hiding. He turned to face her fully. Suggesting working together. Equal partners. The proposition hung in the air between them. Equal partners. Not rescuer and rescued. Not guide and follower, but allies with complementary knowledge and skills. What exactly would that entail? Elizabeth asked carefully. You know settler ways, military protocols, how officials think. I know tracking, survival, Apache territory. Dakota held her gaze steadily. Together, stronger than apart. It made logical sense, yet Elizabeth hesitated. Partnership meant commitment, mutual responsibility, shared danger. It meant fully embracing a path that led away from everything familiar. If we do this, she said slowly, we need absolute honesty between us. No withholding information because you think I'm too fragile to handle it. A rare smile touched Dakota's lips. You not fragile. Snake proved that. And no disappearing for days without explanation, she continued, unable to suppress an answering smile. We plan together, decide together. Agreed. He extended his hand in the white man's gesture of agreement, something he must have learned from traders. Partners. Elizabeth took his hand, struck by the solemnity of the moment. His palm was calloused against hers, warm and steady. Partners. With their alliance formalized, they turned to practical matters. Using Elizabeth's journal, they created a crude map of the territory, marking known locations of the raiders' activities. They must have a main camp, Elizabeth reasoned. Somewhere to store weapons, plan operations. Dakota indicated a region near the territorial border. Many canyons here, good hiding places. Army patrols avoid area. And the man giving orders, the one with the spectacles, he'd need somewhere to send and receive communications. She tapped the map thoughtfully. A town with a telegraph office or regular mail service. 3 towns within riding distance of border canyons. Dakota marked each one. This one has army post. As they worked, their different perspectives yielded insights neither would have reached alone. Elizabeth understood bureaucratic procedures and chain of command. Dakota recognized terrain advantages and tracking signs invisible to untrained eyes. By midday, they had developed a rough plan. Gather intelligence on the raiders' movements, identify the full extent of their operation, and document everything with dates, names, and locations. Only with irrefutable evidence would they approach authorities deemed trustworthy. First step, need to observe closest town. Dakota decided. See who comes, who goes. Look for man with new spectacles. I should be the one to go into town, Elizabeth suggested. I can move freely without attracting attention. You'd be immediately suspect. Dakota frowned. Too dangerous for you alone. I won't be recognized, she insisted. My clothes are trail-worn, my skin sun-darkened. No one would connect me with the Boston lady who arrived months ago. Their first disagreement as partners sparked a heated debate. Dakota argued for caution, Elizabeth for practicality. Neither yielded ground until Dakota finally proposed a compromise. We go together, he said. I watch from hills. You enter town. If trouble comes, signal with mirror. He removed a small polished piece of metal from his pouch. Apache signal method. I teach you. Elizabeth accepted the mirror, recognizing the trust it represented. When do we leave? 3 days. Need preparations. Need to cache supplies here for return. His eyes held hers with new intensity. Once we leave canyon, different world. More dangerous. I understand the risks, she assured him. This isn't just about my safety anymore. People will die if we do nothing. Dakota nodded, something like respect deepening in his expression. You have warrior heart in woman's body. Coming from him, Elizabeth realized this was the highest compliment. As they shared the last of their water, passing the canteen between them, she felt a certainty that had eluded her since leaving Boston. For the first time, she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what needed doing. Not because society dictated it, but because her own moral compass pointed true. Dawn brought no birdsong as they departed the canyon's safety. The horse carried minimal supplies, water, dried meat, weapons, and Elizabeth's journal now filled with their combined intelligence. Everything else they cached in the cave, buried beneath stones for their hoped-for return. They traveled cross-country, avoiding established trails. Dakota led them through arroyos and dry washes where their tracks would vanish with the next wind. By midday, the landscape had changed from red canyon walls to rolling grasslands, dotted with mesquite and chaparral. Fort Buchanan lies beyond that ridge, Dakota said, indicating a distant line of hills. Army patrols this area. Must be careful. Elizabeth nodded, scanning the horizon. How close can we get to town without being seen? Ridge has good view. Can watch town from there. He studied her trail-worn appearance critically. Need story ready. Why you travel alone? They had rehearsed her cover story repeatedly. A widow seeking. Her late husband's brother in Patagonia. traveling from Tucson after selling their modest homestead. Simple, verifiable if anyone checked, and common enough not to invite suspicion. As they approached the ridge overlooking the settlement, Dakota suddenly raised his hand in warning. They dismounted immediately, leading the horse into a thicket of mesquite. "Riders coming," he whispered, his body tense with alertness. Within moments, Elizabeth heard it too. The rhythmic thud of hooves, the jingle of military tack. Dakota motioned her deeper into the thicket, positioning himself protectively between her and the approaching sound. A cavalry patrol passed less than 50 yards away, 6 soldiers led by a sergeant, all looking hot and disinterested in their surroundings. None glanced toward the mesquite thicket where Elizabeth held her breath, one hand on the horse's muzzle to keep it quiet. After they passed, Dakota released a slow breath. "Army increasing patrols. Not good sign. Do you think they're connected to the raiders?" Elizabeth asked. "Some maybe. Not all." He frowned, considering. Regular soldiers follow orders. May not know real purpose. They continued more cautiously, finally reaching the ridge as afternoon shadows lengthened. Below them lay Patagonia, a dusty collection of false-fronted buildings straddling a single main street. A general store, saloon, a sayer's office and telegraph office formed the town's core, with scattered houses and shacks spreading outward. "Smaller than I expected," Elizabeth observed as they surveyed the settlement from their concealed position. "Small towns more dangerous," Dakota replied. "Everyone notices strangers." They watched the town's rhythms for hours. Freight wagons arriving and departing, miners coming in from nearby claims, the occasional military messenger riding through. Dakota pointed out details Elizabeth might have missed. How certain men exchanged furtive greetings, which buildings had guards posted discreetly nearby. As dusk approached, they retreated to a secluded canyon to make camp. After a cold meal, no fire risked this close to patrols, they finalized their plan for the following day. "I'll enter town mid-morning," Elizabeth said, "when the store will be busiest. Less attention on any one customer." Dakota nodded, unfolding a piece of rawhide on which he'd drawn a rough map of the town. "Telegraph office here. Watch who sends messages. Store has good view of Main Street. Listen more than talk. And if I see the man with the spectacles, or any of the raiders, do nothing. Just remember details." His expression was grave. "No risks. First visit for looking only." Elizabeth understood his caution but felt impatience building. "We need more than observations, Dakota. We need proof, documents, names, specific plans. Proof comes later. First, learn pattern." He handed her the signal mirror they'd practiced with. "If danger comes, catch sunlight, flash 3 times toward ridge. I will create diversion." They went over contingencies and meeting locations until both were satisfied. Tomorrow would test their partnership in ways the canyon's safety never could. As they settled onto their bedrolls beneath a starless, cloudy sky, Elizabeth found sleep elusive. Tomorrow she would step back into the world of settlers and soldiers, a world that should have felt familiar but now seemed foreign after weeks with Dakota. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly, sensing he was also awake. "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "Fear keeps warriors alive. Only fools feel no fear." His honesty comforted her more than false reassurances would have. "I'm afraid too. Not of the danger exactly. More of failing, of not preventing what's coming." "Cannot save everyone," Dakota said gently. "Can only make best choice each moment." "How do you bear it? Knowing your people suffer while others prosper on stolen land." Dakota was silent so long Elizabeth thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured. "Bear it because must bear it. Like desert plant that bends with wind instead of breaking." She heard him shift position in the darkness. "Apache way is to endure, to remember, to wait for right moment, then act with purpose." "I'm not sure I have your patience," Elizabeth admitted. "Different strengths for different battles," he replied. "Your quick mind sees patterns I might miss. My patience gives time for those patterns to appear." His words underscored what she'd increasingly come to appreciate. Their differences were not weaknesses but complementary strengths. Together, they possessed resources neither had alone. As dawn approached, Elizabeth finally drifted toward sleep, her hand resting near the military map they discovered attached to a dispatch rider's saddle, their first tangible evidence of troop movements that aligned too perfectly with the raiders' activities to be coincidence. Tomorrow would bring new risks, but also the possibility of answers. For now, that would have to be enough. Elizabeth's visit to Patagonia yielded more than either had dared hope. Posing as a widow, she'd spent hours in the general store, purchasing small necessities while eavesdropping on conversations. The storekeeper, eager to assist a seemingly vulnerable woman, had been particularly informative about local happenings. "Terrible business with those Apache raids," he'd commented, wrapping her purchases in brown paper. "Though some say they're not really Apache at all." That single comment had led to a careful conversation revealing significant local doubts about the supposed Indian attacks. By day's end, Elizabeth had names of 3 prominent citizens who questioned the official narrative, potential allies, should they need them. Now, 3 days later, they camped in a secluded box canyon 20 miles from Fort Buchanan. The information they'd gathered lay spread before them: Elizabeth's journal notes, the military map, and sketches of key locations. "The pattern is clear," Elizabeth said, indicating the map. "These troop deployments leave specific areas unprotected exactly when raids occur." Dakota nodded grimly. "Not coincidence. Someone high-ranked involved. The question is who?" Elizabeth rubbed her temples, fighting fatigue. Their days had been long, tense with constant vigilance. "And how high the conspiracy reaches." Dakota added wood to their small fire, the nights growing cooler as autumn approached. "Need to see fort records. Dispatch logs would show who gave orders." "Impossible," Elizabeth sighed. "We can't exactly walk into the commander's office and ask to review confidential military documents." "Not impossible. Difficult." He studied the map intently. "Where there is will, there is path." They sat in companionable silence, the crackling fire and distant coyote calls the only sounds. After weeks together, they developed an ease that required fewer words, more subtle communication. Elizabeth watched Dakota across the flames, struck by how completely her perception of him had transformed. The savage she'd been taught to fear had proven more honorable than most civilized men she'd known. His quiet strength, unwavering integrity, and profound connection to the land around them had awakened something in her that Boston society had nearly smothered: a capacity for genuine respect unmarred by social pretense. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. "After this is finished, I mean." The question seemed to surprise him. "If we succeed, return to tribe, report to council. And if we gather enough evidence? If the territorial governor acts against the conspirators?" Dakota's expression revealed his skepticism. "White justice rarely extends to Apache land. Even if these men punished, others will come." The truth of his assessment hung heavily between them. Any victory they might achieve would be temporary at best. "What about you?" he asked, turning her question back. "Return to Boston?" Elizabeth shook her head. "No, that life is closed to me now." She touched the beaded bracelet he'd given her for protection during their first visit to Patagonia. A simple band of red and white beads that now felt as much a part of her as her own skin. "I don't know where I belong anymore." "Belonging not always about place," Dakota said quietly. "Sometimes about people. Purpose." Their eyes met across the fire, something unspoken passing between them. Elizabeth felt a flutter beneath her ribs that had nothing to do with fear or danger. "Dakota," she began hesitantly, "I want you to know." A sudden rustle from the canyon entrance silenced her. Both were instantly alert, weapons ready. Dakota motioned for Elizabeth to extinguish the fire while he moved silently toward the sound. Minutes passed in tense darkness. When Dakota returned, his posture had relaxed slightly. "Desert fox," he explained. "Hunting night mice." Elizabeth released her held breath, but the interrupted moment had passed. They rebuilt the fire, smaller this time, and returned to studying their information. As the night deepened, exhaustion finally overcame vigilance. Elizabeth found herself nodding over the journal, unable to focus on the words she'd written. "Sleep," Dakota encouraged. "I take first watch." Too tired to argue, she wrapped herself in her blanket near the fire's warmth. As she drifted toward sleep, she felt something being placed gently around her neck. Dakota's mother's necklace, a small medicine pouch on a leather cord. "For protection," he whispered. "Most valued possession." The significance of the gift wasn't lost on her, even in her exhausted state. This was no mere token, but a family heirloom, a connection to his past and his people. "I can't accept this," she murmured, trying to return it. His hand closed gently over hers, pressing the pouch against her collarbone. "Already decided. Dreams told me. Belongs with you now." In the firelight, his eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. Without thinking, Elizabeth reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his cheek. Dakota remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable yet somehow vulnerable. The moments stretched between them, fragile and charged with unspoken possibility. Then, with gentle deliberation, he took her hand and pressed his lips to her palm. Not quite a kiss, but a gesture of profound intimacy in its restraint. "Sleep," he repeated softly. "Tomorrow brings new dangers." As Elizabeth curled beneath her blanket, the medicine pouch warm against her skin, she recognized that something fundamental had shifted between them. Whatever dangers tomorrow brought, they would face them not just as partners, but as two people whose lives had become irrevocably intertwined. Her last conscious thought before sleep claimed her was that perhaps belonging wasn't about place after all, but about finding someone who saw you, truly saw you, and valued what they found. The trading post at Sonoyta Creek stood at the crossroads of several ranch trails, a weathered adobe structure with a sagging porch and hitching rail. Elizabeth adjusted her worn shawl, tucking copper strands beneath a faded bonnet while Dakota observed from the hillside above. They'd agreed this smaller outpost presented less risk than returning to Patagonia, a place to gather supplies and information before their planned approach to the fort. A bell jangled discordantly as Elizabeth entered. The interior smelled of leather, tobacco, and coffee. Behind a rough-hewn counter, a heavy-set man with an impressive mustache nodded in greeting. "Help you, ma'am?" "Just a few necessities," Elizabeth replied, adopting the slight Texas drawl she'd perfected for her widow persona. "Been traveling some time." The storekeeper, Wilson, according to the faded sign, proved as talkative as she'd hoped. While measuring coffee beans and flour, he provided a veritable gazette of local news, most notably the increased military presence. "Something's brewing," he confided, leaning across the counter. "More patrols than I've seen in years. They claim Apache trouble, but Old Man Jenkins lost a whole herd last month and swears it wasn't Indians took 'em." Elizabeth made appropriate noises of concern while selecting a few more items. As Wilson tallied her purchases, the door opened again, admitting two weather-beaten ranchers. They nodded to Elizabeth, a respectable woman being a rarity in these parts, before addressing the storekeeper. "Mail come through yet, Wilson?" "Yesterday. Yours is in the back." While Wilson fetched their mail, the older rancher turned to Elizabeth with the blunt curiosity of frontier folk. "Don't recall seeing you before, ma'am. Passing through." "Heading to Tucson," she replied with practiced ease. "My cousin lives there." "Tucson's grown something fierce," the man commented. "Hardly recognize it anymore." "What's your cousin's name? Might know him." Before Elizabeth could fabricate a response, Wilson returned with a stack of newspapers and letters. Latest Tucson paper came too. Got that story about the Boston lady's funeral in it. Quite the society event, apparently. Elizabeth's heart stuttered. "Boston lady? Some rich gal who came west and got herself killed," the rancher explained, accepting his mail. "Hargrove or Hartwell, something like that." With trembling fingers, Elizabeth placed another coin on the counter. "May I see that newspaper?" Wilson pushed the folded paper toward her. There, on the third page, the headline struck like a physical blow. "Tragic end for Boston socialite. Elizabeth Hargrove laid to rest. The room seemed to tilt as she scanned the article. According to the account, her body had been discovered weeks earlier, an apparent victim of Apache marauders. Her cousin Martha had identified the remains and arranged a modest but dignified service befitting the daughter of prominent Boston family. "You all right, ma'am?" Wilson asked, noticing her pallor. "You've gone white as a sheet." "Just the heat," Elizabeth managed, folding the paper and tucking it into her basket. "Is there somewhere I might sit for a moment?" Wilson directed her to a bench beneath the single window. Elizabeth sank down, mind racing. She was legally dead, her identity erased by an elaborate fabrication. But why? What could Martha possibly gain from such deception? The answer came as she continued reading. A smaller article noted that, in recognition of her devoted care during Miss Hargrove's Western sojourn, Martha Hargrove had been named beneficiary of her cousin's considerable inheritance, the family having no closer relations. The money, of course. With James gone and Elizabeth declared dead, Martha, a distant cousin at best, had positioned herself to claim the Hargrove fortune. But something darker lurked beneath this opportunism. The timing was too convenient, the fabricated Apache attack too aligned with the raiders' pattern. Could Martha be connected to the conspirators? Did she know Elizabeth had witnessed their meeting? Elizabeth's hands shook as she purchased the newspaper and a few additional supplies. Outside, she struggled to maintain her composure while walking unhurriedly toward the meeting point where Dakota waited. Once safely beyond sight of the trading post, she abandoned pretense, running toward the sheltering trees where he had concealed himself. He emerged immediately, alarmed by her evident distress. "What happened?" he demanded, scanning for pursuers. Wordlessly, Elizabeth thrust the newspaper toward him. Dakota's English reading skills had improved through their lessons, but she pointed to the relevant headline to ensure clarity. His expression darkened as he grasped the implications. "They declare you dead." "My cousin Martha," Elizabeth explained breathlessly. "She identified a body as mine, claimed my inheritance. But there's more. The supposed Apache attack fits exactly with the pattern we've documented." Dakota studied the paper with growing concern. "Your cousin connected to conspirators? It seems impossible, but the coincidence is too great." Elizabeth paced between the trees, mind racing. "We need to know for certain. There's a newspaper editor in Tucson, Jacob Walsh. James mentioned him as an honest man, unafraid to print unpopular truths. Tucson dangerous for you now," Dakota warned. "If seen, raise questions about dead woman walking." "Exactly why I need to go," Elizabeth insisted. "If I'm legally dead, I'm a ghost no one expects. I can move more freely, ask questions without anyone connecting me to Elizabeth Hargrove." Dakota's expression remained troubled. "Too risky. We need allies, Dakota. Someone with the power to publish what we discover." She touched his arm, her voice softening. "Trust me to do this. As you said, different strengths for different battles." The internal struggle played across his features, protectiveness warring with respect for her judgment. Finally, he nodded once, reluctantly. "Not alone," he stipulated. "I come to Tucson too." "It would be suicide for you to enter the city," she countered. "An Apache would be instantly suspect." "Not as Apache," Dakota said thoughtfully. "As Mexican traitor. Father's blood useful sometimes." Elizabeth considered this. With his mixed heritage, Dakota could indeed pass as Mexican, especially in a busy place like Tucson where transient workers came and went without notice. As they returned to their hidden camp to plan this new, dangerous venture, Elizabeth felt an odd lightness despite the shocking discovery. Elizabeth Hargrove, Boston socialite, dutiful daughter, conventional woman, was officially dead. Perhaps now she was truly free to become whoever she needed to be. Darkness cloaked their camp in the foothills outside Tucson. Tomorrow they would enter the city, their most perilous undertaking yet. Elizabeth studied Dakota's transformation with a mixture of admiration and concern as he practiced his disguise as Miguel Vasquez, a trader from Sonora. "The accent is perfect," she encouraged as he repeated the simple story they'd crafted. Just remember to keep your responses brief. Dakota nodded, adjusting the serape draped across his shoulder. With his hair tied back rather than braided, a worn sombrero shadowing his features, and the distinctive Apache beadwork hidden away, he looked convincingly Mexican. Only his eyes, observant, wary, might betray his true identity to someone looking closely enough. "Your turn," he said, gesturing to Elizabeth's own disguise. She had darkened her copper hair with a walnut husk mixture and styled it severely beneath a plain bonnet. Her one remaining dress had been altered to suggest the practical garb of a working woman rather than a lady of means. Most importantly, she'd adopted the slightly hunched posture and downcast eyes of someone accustomed to avoiding attention. "Mrs. Sarah Wilson, seamstress and widow," she recited. "Seeking work in Tucson after her husband's passing left her destitute." "Why together?" Dakota quizzed, testing their story. "You kindly offered protection on the dangerous journey after doing business with my late husband," Elizabeth replied smoothly. "A respectable arrangement, with me paying a small sum for your escort." They rehearsed various scenarios: questions from authorities, unexpected encounters, emergency signals, until both were satisfied with their preparation. Then, as the fire burned down to embers, they turned to their final contingency plans. "If we're separated," Elizabeth said, "we meet at the mission ruins south of town after nightfall." "If one doesn't come for 2 nights?" Dakota asked, voicing the question they'd been avoiding. Elizabeth met his gaze steadily. "Then the other continues alone. The evidence must reach the proper authorities, regardless of personal cost." Dakota's expression remained impassive, but his hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the map between them. "Will not abandon you." "Nor I you," she replied softly. "But we must be practical. What we've uncovered is bigger than either of us." The conspiracy had grown clearer yet more complex with each piece of intelligence they'd gathered. Beyond the raiders and their military accomplices lay a network of land speculators, including several territorial officials. Their scheme was elegant in its brutality. Orchestrate attacks blamed on Apaches, provoke retaliatory violence from settlers, and use the resulting chaos to justify both Apache removal and land seizures from frightened homesteaders. Elizabeth's cousin Martha, they discovered, was merely a pawn, romantically involved with one of the conspirators and manipulated into identifying a conveniently similar body as her missing cousin. The inheritance was her reward for complicity, willing or unwitting. "Should sleep," Dakota suggested, though neither moved to separate. Instead, Elizabeth found herself asking the question that had circled her mind for days. "What happens after? If we succeed?" Dakota's eyes reflected the dying firelight. "For you, many paths possible. Education, skills valued in towns. Could make new life." "That's not what I asked," Elizabeth said quietly. "What happens to us?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Dakota released her hand, reaching instead for the leather cord around his neck. From it hung a small pouch matching the one he'd given Elizabeth. "Apache beliefs say," he began, then stopped, searching for words. "When souls recognize each other, Great Spirit rejoices. But world of men creates boundaries spirits don't understand." "You mean it's impossible?" Elizabeth whispered, heart sinking despite her attempt at pragmatism. "No," Dakota answered, surprising her. "Mean it is difficult. Would require great sacrifice. From both." "What kind of sacrifice?" His expression softened in a way she'd rarely witnessed. "For me, cannot return to tribe as husband to white woman. Would be unwelcome. For you, life with Apache man means never again belonging to settler world. Always between, always suspect." The stark reality of what he described should have dismayed her. Instead, Elizabeth felt an unexpected clarity. The worlds they'd come from had already rejected them in different ways. Perhaps the path forward lay not in returning to those worlds, but in creating something new between them. "I've been between my entire life," she admitted. "Never fitting Boston society's mold, then failing at proper frontier womanhood. Perhaps being between worlds is exactly where I belong. Dakota studied her face, as if memorizing each feature. Then, with deliberate care, he removed his mother's necklace from around his neck and held it out to her. Apache tradition, he explained. When warrior gives mother's necklace to woman, shows intent. Sacred promise. Elizabeth understood the profound significance of the gesture. This was not a courtship ritual from either of their worlds, but something more elemental, a pledge transcending cultural boundaries. With trembling fingers, she accepted the necklace, the worn leather cord warm from his body. What do I do? Wear until morning, he said softly. If still wearing when sun rises, I know your answer. She slipped the cord over her head, the small medicine pouch resting beside her heart. No further words were necessary as they prepared for sleep, each lost in private thoughts of a future neither had imagined possible weeks ago. Before settling onto her bedroll, Elizabeth took a sheet of paper from her journal and began writing by the fire's fading light. If tomorrow brought disaster, she wanted some record to survive, testimony to what they'd discovered and, perhaps more importantly, to what they'd become to each other. Dakota watched her silently, understanding without asking. When she finished, he took the letter and tucked it securely into his boot, the last place searchers would look if the worst happened. Now sleep, he said gently. Tomorrow we face many dangers. Tonight we have this moment. As Elizabeth closed her eyes, the weight of both necklaces against her skin felt like a promise. One she intended to keep, whatever tomorrow might bring. Fort Buchanan rose from the desert like a testament to man's determination to impose order on wilderness. Adobe walls surrounded wooden buildings arranged in military precision around a central parade ground. The American flag snapped in the hot breeze as Elizabeth and Dakota approached the main gate, their borrowed wagon loaded with trade goods acquired in Tucson. Papers, demanded the bored sentry, barely glancing at them. Elizabeth produced the documents they'd obtained through a combination of Elizabeth's remaining funds and Dakota's knowledge of less reputable Tucson merchants. The forgeries identified them as exactly who they claimed to be, a widow and a Mexican trader with legitimate business at the fort. Purpose? The sentry continued, examining the papers with minimal interest. Selling wares to the officers' wives, Elizabeth explained, adopting a deferential tone. Fine needlework and lace. My escort, she nodded toward Dakota, who kept his eyes appropriately lowered, has tobacco and spirits to offer at the sutler's store. The mention of spirits perked the sentry's interest. Been dry here for weeks. Supply wagons late. My companion has excellent Mexican brandy, Elizabeth offered. Perhaps you might direct us to the proper authorities for trading permits? The suggestion of alcohol smoothed their entry. Within minutes, they were inside the fort, directed toward the quartermaster's office for formal permission to conduct business. Remember, Elizabeth murmured as they crossed the parade ground. We separate once permits are secured. I visit the officers' quarters while you approach the enlisted men. Meet at the wagon in 2 hours. Dakota gave an almost imperceptible nod, his posture remaining that of a subservient Mexican trader rather than the proud Apache scout she knew. His ability to transform himself never ceased to amaze her. The quartermaster, a harried lieutenant named Foster, barely looked at their papers before stamping the necessary permits. Officers' Row is behind headquarters, he instructed Elizabeth. Sutler's store is by the north wall, he told Dakota in deliberately slow, loud English. Gracias, senor, Dakota replied with a thick accent, nothing in his manner betraying his perfect comprehension. They parted ways, each carrying out their assigned role in the dangerous charade. Elizabeth moved among the officers' quarters, offering her needlework while gathering snippets of conversation and noting which officers seemed most involved in troop deployments. Dakota, meanwhile, used the allure of contraband liquor to loosen the tongues of sergeants and corporals near the enlisted men's barracks. By midday, Elizabeth had confirmed their suspicions. Major Harlan Blackwood, the fort's second-in-command, was indeed coordinating unusual patrol patterns that left certain areas conspicuously unprotected. More damning, she overheard his aide mentioning special dispatches that bypassed the normal command chain. As she packed her unsold goods at the officers' wives' gathering, a voice froze her blood. "You seem familiar, madam. Have we met?" Elizabeth turned slowly to face Lieutenant Colonel Charles Thornton, the fort commander himself. A distinguished man in his 50s with graying temples and shrewd eyes. "I don't believe so, sir," she replied, keeping her gaze modestly lowered. "I'm recently arrived from El Paso." Thornton studied her with uncomfortable intensity. "Curious. You remind me of someone I encountered in Santa Fe some months ago." Elizabeth's heart raced. Had he seen her during her journey west? "Many say I have a common face, sir. It's both a blessing and a curse in my profession." The commander seemed about to press further when a commotion erupted across the parade ground. Elizabeth glanced over to see several soldiers gathering near the sutler's store. "Excuse me," Thornton said, his attention diverted. "Duty calls." The moment he turned away, Elizabeth slipped from the officers' quarters, circling toward their wagon while avoiding the disturbance. Something had gone wrong. She could feel it. Had Dakota been discovered? As she neared their rendezvous point, a hand suddenly gripped her arm, pulling her between two supply buildings. She nearly cried out before recognizing Dakota, his face tense with urgency. "Must leave now," he whispered. "Found ledger in Major's office. Proof of conspiracy. But guard returned early." "You weren't seen?" she asked anxiously. "Not clearly." Created distraction with spilled brandy. He pressed something into her hands. Several folded pages torn from an official military ledger. Complete evidence. Names, dates, locations of planned raids. Elizabeth quickly concealed the papers in her bodice. "The wagon." "Too slow. They search for Mexican trader now." Dakota glanced toward the main gate where soldiers were gathering. "Need different way out." "The south wall," Elizabeth suggested. "I overheard it's undermanned during shift change." Dakota nodded. 30 minutes to reach wall. Then run for Arroyo beyond. They moved separately through the fort, Elizabeth carrying her sewing basket with practiced nonchalance, Dakota keeping to shadows and service areas. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as they made their way toward the south wall, carefully timing their movements between patrol rotations. They were 20 yards from freedom when disaster struck. A corporal emerged unexpectedly from the officers' mess, stopping short at the sight of Dakota. "Hey, you're that Mexican with the brandy," he called. Then, eyes narrowing with sudden suspicion, "Wait, you're no Mexican." Dakota reacted instantly, shoving the man backward and grabbing Elizabeth's hand. "Run," he commanded, abandoning all pretense of accent. They sprinted for the wall as shouts erupted behind them. A whistle blew, once, twice, 3 times, the fort's alarm signal. Elizabeth hitched up her skirts, running faster than she'd thought possible toward the unguarded section of wall. "There!" Dakota pointed to a wagon positioned near the adobe barrier, their escape route. Elizabeth clambered onto the wagon, Dakota right behind her. From this height, they could reach the top of the wall. As the first soldiers rounded the corner, weapons drawn, Dakota boosted Elizabeth upward. She scrambled onto the wall, turning back to help him. Their eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding. Whatever came next, they faced it together. The evidence secure between them, their fates now irrevocably linked. "Together," Elizabeth whispered, reaching down for his hand. "Together," Dakota affirmed, clasping her outstretched fingers as shots rang out behind them. The shot struck the adobe wall inches from Dakota's head, sending fragments flying. In that critical moment, he made a split-second decision that would haunt him for days to come. "Go!" he shouted to Elizabeth, already balanced atop the wall. "Take evidence. Meet at Mission Ruins." Before she could protest, he dropped back to the ground, drawing the soldiers' attention by running in the opposite direction. The diversion worked. Most pursuers followed him, giving Elizabeth precious seconds to disappear over the wall's far side. Elizabeth landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact as Dakota had taught her. The stolen ledger pages crinkled against her skin as she scrambled to her feet. Every instinct screamed to wait for Dakota, but logic prevailed. The evidence was paramount. With a last anguished glance toward the fort, she ran for the sheltering arroyo, Dakota's signal mirror clutched in her hand. Inside the fort, Dakota led his pursuers on a chaotic chase through supply yards and stables. His Apache training made him virtually impossible to corner, yet escape remained equally elusive. He needed a diversion significant enough to cover his flight. Opportunity came in the form of the fort's powder magazine, a small, heavily guarded building near the north wall. Not the main arsenal, but a secondary storage for routine supplies. The lone sentry had abandoned his post to join the chase, leaving the door secured but unwatched. Dakota slipped inside, working quickly with flint and tinder from his pocket. He wasn't aiming to destroy, merely to create confusion. The small blaze he set to a stack of empty crates would spread slowly, giving him time to escape while eventually creating enough smoke to draw every soldier to contain it. The strategy worked. As alarmed shouts of "Fire!" replaced "Intruder," Dakota scaled the north wall using supply crates and disappeared into the gathering dusk. By nightfall, they were both running for their lives in opposite directions. Elizabeth moved south toward the mission ruins, their designated meeting place. The stolen ledger pages were now wrapped in oilcloth and secured in her boot. She'd abandoned her dress for the men's clothing hidden in their cache outside town, allowing faster movement across the rugged terrain. Her mind raced with contingency plans. If Dakota didn't arrive by the second night, she would continue alone to Tucson, seeking the newspaper editor. If that failed, the territorial capital in Prescott became her next destination. The evidence would reach authorities, whatever the personal cost. Meanwhile, Dakota faced a more immediate danger. The fort had dispatched mounted patrols along all major trails. With no time to reach their hidden cache, he had only his knife, a water skin, and intimate knowledge of the land to aid his escape. He moved northwest, away from the mission ruins, intending to circle back only when pursuit had thinned. A risky strategy but necessary, leading the soldiers directly to Elizabeth would doom them both. Dawn found Elizabeth hidden in a rocky outcropping overlooking the mission ruins. From this vantage, she could observe any approach without being seen. The crumbling Spanish structure stood silent in the morning light, no sign of either Dakota or pursuers. She used the signal mirror to flash a brief message toward the hills where Dakota might be watching, though she dared not maintain the signal long enough to draw unwanted attention. For Dakota, dawn brought new challenges. A patrol had tracked him to a dry creek bed, where he'd been forced to leave footprints in the soft sand. Now 4 soldiers followed his trail with the focus of experienced trackers. He needed to cross open ground to reach the mission by nightfall, impossible while pursued. The decision formed reluctantly in his mind. He must enter the territory of the Shadow. Rock Apache, a band known for their hostility to outsiders, even other Apache. It was a desperate gamble. If caught by Shadow Rock scouts, his death would be certain but quick. If the soldiers followed him across the boundary marked by ancient cairns, the resulting conflict might provide the diversion he needed to escape both threats. By midday, Elizabeth's vigilance was rewarded by distant movement, a cavalry patrol approaching the mission from the east. She retreated deeper into the rocks, watching as 6 soldiers methodically searched the ruins. "She can't have gotten far," one called to the others. "Lieutenant says the woman's our priority. She has the documents." Elizabeth's breath caught. They knew about the ledger pages and were specifically hunting her. Worse, they seemed uninterested in Dakota's whereabouts, suggesting either his capture or escape. The uncertainty was agonizing. When the patrol finally departed, she remained hidden, too wary to approach the ruins directly. As darkness fell, she used the signal mirror one final time, catching the last rays of sunset to send a brief flash toward the western hills. To her astonishment, an answering flash came almost immediately, not from the west, but the south. Dakota had somehow circled completely around the search parties to approach from the unexpected direction. Relief flooded through her, quickly tempered by caution. She would wait until full darkness before attempting to reach the new rendezvous point indicated by his signal. Dakota, meanwhile, crouched in the shadow of a massive saguaro, his body painted with mud to blend with the desert. He had indeed crossed Shadow Rock territory, a harrowing journey requiring all his skill to avoid their patrols. The pursuing soldiers had turned back at the boundary cairns, unwilling to risk violation of the tenuous treaty. Now, as stars emerged above, he prepared for the dangerous nighttime journey to reach Elizabeth. His body ached from 2 days without rest, a bullet grazed on his arm throbbing beneath a hasty bandage. Yet knowing she had successfully evaded capture renewed his strength. He touched the empty space where his mother's necklace had hung, remembering its new place around Elizabeth's neck. Against all odds, they had both survived the first phase of their desperate flight. Tonight they would reunite and plan their next move. If they could navigate the ring of soldiers still searching the darkness between them. Their reunion in the midnight shadows of a mesquite thicket had been brief but profound. Hands clasping with desperate strength, foreheads touching in wordless communication before practicality forced them to move. Soldiers still patrolled the area, their torches visible on distant ridgelines. Now, as false dawn painted the eastern horizon, Elizabeth and Dakota crouched in a dry wash 5 miles from Patagonia. Their evidence packet, military ledger pages, Elizabeth's detailed journal notes, and the map showing coordinated troop movements, lay wrapped in oilcloth between them. "The newspaper editor in Tucson is our best hope," Elizabeth whispered. "With these documents published, the conspiracy would be exposed." Dakota shook his head. "Too many patrols between here and Tucson. They watch all roads." He gestured to the blood-stained bandage on his arm where the bullet had grazed him. "Major Black would not take chances now." "Then what? We can't just—" Hoofbeats silenced her instantly. They pressed deeper into the wash's shadow as riders approached. Not military patrol patterns, but the irregular rhythm of civilian mounts. "Told you they'd come this way," a rough voice carried on the morning air. "Apache always follow watercourses, even dry ones." "Keep your voice down," another man responded. "That scout's no ordinary Apache. Bastard's half-ghost from what I hear." Elizabeth's eyes widened in recognition. Raiders, the same men who'd been orchestrating attacks on both settlers and Apache. Dakota confirmed her suspicion with a slight nod, his hand moving silently to his knife. The riders, 5 in total, dismounted at the wash's edge, checking for tracks. It would be minutes before they discovered their quarry hidden in the deep shadows. "We need to split up," Elizabeth breathed against Dakota's ear. "I'll create a diversion while you escape with the evidence." His response was immediate and firm. "No separation. Not again." Before she could argue, a cold voice called from above. "I'm afraid neither of you is going anywhere." They looked up to find Major Blackwood himself standing at the wash's edge, revolver aimed steadily at them. Behind him appeared more men, the raiders now joined by 3 soldiers in uniform. "Miss Hargrove, I presume," Blackwood continued, a thin smile crossing his features. "Or should I say, the late Miss Hargrove? Your resurrection is most inconvenient." Slowly, Dakota and Elizabeth rose to their feet, his body partially shielding hers. Elizabeth's mind raced, calculating odds and options that dwindled with each passing second. "The evidence is already on its way to the territorial governor," she bluffed, chin raised defiantly. "Killing us won't stop the truth." Blackwood laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "A valiant attempt, but we both know that's not true. You wouldn't have trusted anyone else with those documents." He gestured with his revolver. "Hand them over, and perhaps I can arrange a more comfortable form of silencing than my associates would prefer." The raiders shifted restlessly behind him, their expressions making their preferences abundantly clear. Dakota's stance changed subtly, a minute adjustment Elizabeth had learned to recognize. He was preparing to attack, to create an opening for her escape even at the cost of his life. "Don't," she whispered, her hand finding his. Whatever came, they would face it together. "Touching," Blackwood observed coldly. "The savage and the society lady. Who would have imagined?" "The only savage I see wears a uniform," Elizabeth replied, stalling for time as she surveyed their surroundings. 9 armed men against Dakota's knife and her walking staff, impossible odds by any measure. Blackwood sighed with exaggerated patience. Enough theatrics. The documents, if you please. Then we can discuss the manner of your disappearance. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Elizabeth felt Dakota's muscles coil beside her, his decision made despite her protest. In that suspended moment, a bird call sounded from the ridge above, a desert quail's distinctive pattern, yet subtly wrong to the trained ear. Dakota froze, his head tilting slightly as he listened. When the call came again, a barely perceptible smile touched his lips. "What are you grinning at, Apache?" demanded one of the raiders. Dakota's response was calm, almost conversational. "You made mistake crossing Shadow Rock territory yesterday." Confusion crossed Blackwood's face. "What the devil are you?" The first arrow took the major in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The second found a raider's throat before anyone registered what was happening. By the third and fourth arrows, panic erupted among the ambushers. "Apache!" Someone screamed as dark figures materialized on the ridgeline. 15 or more warriors, their faces painted for war. Chaos exploded in the wash. The raiders fired wildly at shadows while the soldiers tried to establish defensive positions. Dakota seized the moment, pulling Elizabeth toward a narrow side channel as bullets and arrows flew overhead. "You're doing?" Elizabeth gasped as they ran crouched through the drainage. "Shadow Rock followed soldiers following me," Dakota explained between breaths. "Old enemies, but hatred for bluecoats stronger." They emerged from the wash to find 3 mounted Apache warriors waiting, one leading an extra horse. Dakota exchanged rapid words in his native tongue, gesturing urgently toward Patagonia. "We ride now," he told Elizabeth, helping her onto one of the horses. "Shadow Rock give us chance to complete mission while they settle score with raiders." As they galloped away from the skirmish, Elizabeth clutched the precious evidence packet against her chest. Behind them, gunfire and war cries echoed across the desert. A battle neither side had anticipated but both had helped create through years of deception and broken promises. "Where are we going?" she called to Dakota, who rode slightly ahead. He pointed toward a distant plume of dust on the main road. "Army patrol from Fort Yuma, not corrupted by Blackwood. Shadow Rock leader told me while you create distraction." Elizabeth blinked in surprise. "I created a distraction?" "Your words to Blackwood kept him talking while I recognized warrior signals." Dakota glanced back, respect evident in his expression. Good partners think alike. As they rode toward what might be salvation or further danger, Elizabeth felt the weight of both necklaces against her skin beneath her shirt. Whatever awaited them with the Fort Yuma patrol, they approached it not as fugitives, but as witnesses to truth, their evidence packet secured by blood and sacrifice. Captain James Hollister of Fort Yuma proved to be everything Major Blackwood was not: honorable, forthright, and incorruptible. Upon examining their evidence, he immediately placed Elizabeth and Dakota under his protection, dispatching riders to both the territorial governor and his commanding general. The confrontation between the Fort Yuma patrol and Blackwood's remaining forces never materialized. The corrupt major, wounded by the Shadow Rock arrow and abandoned by his fleeing co-conspirators, had bled to death in the dry wash, a fate Elizabeth could not bring herself to mourn given the lives his schemes had cost. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of testimonies, depositions, and official investigations. Lieutenant Colonel Thornton, while not directly implicated in the conspiracy, was relieved of command for his negligence. For territorial officials faced charges of corruption and incitement to violence. The land-grabbing scheme collapsed entirely when documented evidence of forged deeds came to light. For Elizabeth, official recognition brought an unexpected complication: the restoration of her legal identity and inheritance. Cousin Martha fled to California ahead of fraud charges, leaving Elizabeth once again the wealthy Boston heiress she had never wished to be. "What will you do with it?" Dakota asked as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree outside the governor's residence in Prescott, waiting for yet another deposition. Elizabeth watched a leaf spiral lazily to the ground. "I've been thinking about that canyon of yours." Dakota raised an eyebrow. "Sacred Apache land. Cannot be bought." "Not to buy," she clarified. "To protect." What if the Hargrove fortune established a trust for preservation of Apache sacred sites? Land legally purchased but reserved for traditional use. The idea hung between them, radical yet promising, a way to honor both their worlds rather than choosing between them. Would need wise Apache counsel to guide trust, Dakota said thoughtfully, and trustworthy white lawyers to defend papers. A bridge between worlds, Elizabeth suggested. Like us. Their future remained uncertain. Dakota's tribe had mixed reactions to his role in exposing the conspiracy. Pride in his accomplishment tempered by wariness of his closeness to a white woman. Elizabeth faced similar ambivalence from settler society, celebrated as a heroine while whispered about for her unconventional associations. Captain Hollister offered Dakota a position as official scout and interpreter for Fort Yuma, recognizing his unique abilities while providing military protection that even suspicious settlers wouldn't challenge. It wasn't permanent security, but it offered breathing room to build something more lasting. The autumn day when they finally returned to the sacred canyon felt like completing a circle begun months earlier beside a withered yucca. Elizabeth rode beside Dakota rather than behind him now, an equal partner on the trail as in all things. The canyon welcomed them with golden light filtering through cottonwood leaves. Their cave remained untouched, the ancient paintings still watching over the spring that bubbled from stone. "Home," Elizabeth said simply as they dismounted. Dakota nodded, understanding all the word contained, not just shelter, but belonging, safety, shared purpose. They had stopped first in Tucson, where Elizabeth had commissioned something special from a silversmith who worked with both settler and native designs. Now, as they settled beside their first fire in the restored cave, she removed a small package from her saddlebag. "I had these made," she said, unwrapping a pair of silver medallions on leather cords. Each bore a design combining elements meaningful to them both. The Apache sunrise symbol interwoven with the Hargrove family crest, neither dominating the other. "Wedding necklaces," she explained, suddenly shy despite all they'd shared. "If you still want." Dakota took her hands, the medallions nestled between their palms. "Wanted since found you by yucca," he admitted. "Even when thought impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Elizabeth smiled, thinking of all they'd overcome. "Just difficult, as someone wise once told me." Their marriage ceremony 3 days later combined elements of both traditions. An Apache medicine woman who had known Dakota's mother performed traditional blessings, while a progressive missionary Elizabeth had befriended in Tucson read simple vows that satisfied legal requirements. Most meaningful was the wedding blanket, half woven by Elizabeth using skills Dakota had taught her, half crafted by Dakota using techniques Elizabeth had shown him from her needlework days. Together, the halves formed a complete design that belonged to neither culture. Alone but created something new and beautiful in their joining. The trading post they established at the canyon's edge became known as a place of fair exchange, not just of goods but of knowledge and respect. Elizabeth's language classes helped Apache children navigate the changing world while preserving their heritage. Dakota's wilderness skills taught settlers to live with the land rather than against it. Their difference remained a challenge in a world determined to separate people by blood and background. Yet each year, more came to their remote outposts seeking something the forts and towns couldn't provide: healing, wisdom, or simply a moment's peace in the space between worlds. On summer evenings, they often climbed to the canyon's highest point to watch sunset paint the desert gold. As darkness fell and stars emerged, Elizabeth would sometimes remember that desperate day when death had seemed certain beside a withered yucca. "Strange path that led us here," she reflected once, her head resting against Dakota's shoulder. He smiled, fingers intertwining with hers. "Not strange. Right path all along. Just needed courage to walk it." Under the vast Arizona sky, their silver medallions caught starlight. 2 worlds joined, like the hearts that beat beneath them.